Hi, everybody, and welcome to Blame It on Marketing with your favourite ranty marketers, Emma and Ruta.
Ranty aunties.
Ranty Aunties. I love it. I love it. New title for us. And today we are going to be talking about small budgets. And the really annoying part of having a small marketing budget is the huge expectations that go with it. And we are joined by the awesome Lucy. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Long time fan of the podcast. So it's such a pleasure to be on. My name is Lucy Blenkinsopp. I lead marketing for our private sector division at version 1. We are a technology company specializing in digital transformation and AI services.
Wonderful. So before we dig into small budgets, and also I think there's like a direct relationship between how small your budget is and how big the expectations are. Smaller the budget, the bigger the expectations, but we'll get into that. We do have to ask you, Lucy, for your marketing confession. So something that you've royally effed up. That you're proud to share with us.
Yes, I mean, there is quite a back catalogue when you kind of think back over everything. So I've been in marketing for 15 years. Do you know, there's one that just really sticks in my mind, and I think it was from quite early on in my career. It would have been about 13 years ago, and was working for quite a large company, and we were organizing like an internal conference, and event apps were kind of quite new and fresh and had just kind of come in, and we thought, oh, let's do like one of these kind of trendy event apps for our internal conference, and why not give it to the most junior inexperienced person on the team to manage, you know. Which was me. And I kind of, got the app organized, got sorted, and it was a conference that was overseas. So, I don't know what happened. Basically, the app was set up and it just started firing all these alerts to people at the beginning of the conference. So instead of like the planned at 9 a.m., it's breakfast time, come and get your pancakes, it started firing it at like 6 a.m. and, all of these alerts. And I still remember just the sinking feeling in my tummy of just like, wow, I've really messed this up. And my boss is like looming over me. And I don't know if it was just the time difference or just the complete, maybe these apps just weren't as slick as they are now, but definitely not something that I have rushed to repeat. And it definitely did teach me, how important the little details are. And also, maybe don't give the most junior person in your team a job that
I assume they were like, she's young, she knows how to do tech.
Yeah.
And technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's still, I can laugh about it now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you know what? At least everyone would have been like mega alert.
Absolutely.
They'd have been like, wow.
Yeah, they knew that the app existed after that,
It was all a ploy. It was all a ploy. So, thank you for your confession. Hope that's warmed you up nicely, Lucy. So the thing is, obviously we, and Rucha obviously has alluded to this a little bit already, but a lot of us now are suffering from having small marketing budgets. Some of us always had them, depending on which industry you work in. But it's now the kind of norm that we don't necessarily have the resource and the budget to do some of the stuff that we really need to be able to do. So what's happened? How have we got into this situation where marketing has ended up with such a tiny little budget?
Yeah, and I think we all read the reports that say 7 to 12% of revenue should be spent on marketing, and I think I'm sure that is definitely true for some organizations, but I don't think it's the reality that most of us are actually living in. And sometimes it just feels good to say that out loud when you kind of think, am I the only one? Like, no, you're absolutely not. I think like there's maybe like an external factor and an internal factor. So the external factor is, from where I sit, we are still in this post-COVID world where budgets went down during COVID and they just haven't rebuilt to where they were before. And now, in 2025, going into 2026, we are working in this just tougher, wider macroeconomic environment where there is just not a lot of money to spare for lots of different, departments in an organization. And then I think the internal factor is there is just this heavy ROI scrutiny on absolutely everything marketing and other teams do. So it's just all about measurable returns. And I think that, within marketing, I think anyway, that marketing is an art as well as a science. And there's only, you have to just measure what you can. But then on top of that, you have to tell the right story. And I think maybe that's what, like as marketers, it can be more difficult to do, but that's what we really need to do internally. We have to have the data, and then we have to have the story on top of it to really fight that ROI scrutiny, because there's just this big shift, I think, from the kind of strategic to the tactical. You know, C-suites don't necessarily want to invest in the longer term brand building, and that is it's just, you know, it costs more. It's a lot harder to prove the ROI than say a trade show or a round table or something along those lines. That's kind of how I see it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the skeptical side of this, because I feel like my brain goes straight to, obviously there's a lot of stuff that you've mentioned already, Lucy, but my brain goes straight to the shareholders want more return. They're not getting the return because businesses are not performing. And they're like, how do we squeeze every drop out of this? So my instant reaction to this conversation is, it's the big bad people who want their returns.
Yeah,
It's true.
And I think also, like, if you're not in that kind of a company where you're actually making profit and you're kind of far along, VC funding has also massively decreased. And unless you're some like weird AI startup, you probably aren't getting money anymore. So I think that as well has tightened the budgets for sure. And if you had a small marketing function before and you didn't kind of make a mark in your company, then you'll be the first to feel the cut, right? I feel like marketing teams that have always driven revenue, like heavily, like a big chunk of their company's revenue, they're probably doing better. But if you never got there, then it's a hard time.
You know, you say that though, but just to throw in some insight here, like that's not what I've seen. I see people who are still driving revenue through inbound and are still not getting the right budget. I mean, we can get into that a little bit later, but they still don't have the budget that actually, because there's just a lack of, I guess there's a lack of trust in what marketing delivers, even though it's quite clear. But I can give you some insight into that later.
Very mysterious. Love it. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'm hoping that they haven't had their budgets cut as hard, is I think what I'm trying to say.
I'm doing a face like it's not great.
Okay, that's fair. Just so budgets are tight. We know budgets are tight, and even if they're not, I think this question still stands. So what should we be prioritizing when it comes to a limited budget and limited resources that are kind of more limited than we wish they were?
Yeah, so I think the first one is to look at your channels. So I saw something recent, I think it was LinkedIn that came out with a report that basically said, you know, for B2B sales cycles, you're looking at 200 plus days, 70 plus touch points, and you should focus on 4 key channels. And I think that, you know, rescoping to those high ROI channels is probably one of the best things that you can do. I just think like fewer channels done well, done consistently, will get you to where you need to be. And also like, don't follow the crowd. Like, I think if you kind of look too much externally, and you see what kind of other marketers are doing, you can get distracted and you think, oh, well, maybe we need to, you know, drop however many K on that trade show or whatever it might be. But I think you have to really look at what has worked for your company and what the differentiators are for your organization to, you know, make that, to make the difference. I also think that, you know, we need to get better at this kind of rapid, like, test, learn, report. And so you might have your kind of big campaigns that are running alongside, and that is great, but you have to really foster this kind of culture of marketing innovation with it. And maybe it's just you as a one person marketer, but also within your team. So like, get really comfortable running like micro scale pilots, whether it's, you know, an email on LinkedIn or whatever. And you might only need to, you know, you could do it for free if you're just doing it on your own channels. Or, you know, if you're doing it on LinkedIn, like set a certain amount that you are comfortable with, I guess, losing. You know, run these tests often. And then I think the most important thing is reporting that back in your business, which I think that's the one we kind of forget about. But I think it's just so important to over communicate to your stakeholders that you are constantly kind of looking at ways to improve, move the needle, you know, try to find those little ROI cracks that you can do. The other thing that I just always think about that is so boring, but is just repurposing your content. So like, I think it was
Stop
I think it
making new
was
shit.
a few years ago, my manager at the time, he gave me such good constructive feedback that was basically, you're spending way too much time creating content and nowhere near enough time distributing the content. And he had kind of, I mean, I don't know if he got this from anywhere, but he had just said, you should spend 25% of the budget and effort creating the content and 75% on actually distributing it. And it's just a lesson that I find myself having to learn, like, again and again. And I think like AI can be so useful for this. So maybe you have a blog and just like asking AI to give you ideas for how it could be repurposed. Like, it's just such a quick win that, you know, you've got the original content there. Because I think we all, if we're working on a piece of content or internally within an organization, we see a piece of content often, we overestimate how much or how familiar our prospects are going to be with that content and our organization. But I think the cold hard truth is that, you know, if they think about us at all, it is in very fleeting moments.
Yeah.
I think we all need to kind of like,
Sadly, but yes.
Especially in B2B, right? I feel like probably B2C, it might be slightly different. You know, some people do really align themselves with a brand, but in B2B, they really don't.
Yeah. So I think that's just something we all just really need to keep in mind. Like, you can really make content like go and go before you need to.
If in doubt, they didn't see your blog post.
Yes,
they just
absolutely.
And if they did and they see it again, oh my God, you will be okay. Like, and they will be
fine.
That's okay.
It, isn't it? Yeah, I know. And like, I think the other thing as well is to like track marginal ROI as opposed to the kind of overall campaign ROI or, you know, just overall ROI generally, because that is going to be longer. It's maybe just a little bit, it's just harder, I think, to prove. But if you're kind of tracking the marginal ROI per activity, you're really looking at the incremental gains. And again, like bringing that story, telling that story internally again, will just really help carve out that narrative that that's what your focus area is and that you're constantly looking at that.
For anyone listening, do you guys want to talk about how you would do that? Because I think that's a really practical piece of advice here. So rather than that overall ROI, how would you look at marginal ROI? What would you do?
Yeah, so I think, so for me, what I tend to use for that is I use HubSpot and LinkedIn if I'm tracking that. And the thing that I'm looking at is just like the CPA, so the cost per acquisition. Mm-hmm. So for example, like say you're doing an ad or you're like, say, an in-mail ad or something like that, you're looking at like the clicks and the conversion from that specific in-mail campaign. Or on HubSpot, for example, maybe you're running like a newsletter, like a customer newsletter or prospect newsletter. You're looking at the clicks specifically from that email newsletter getting sent out, coming to your website, and the conversions from there. As opposed to kind of, you know, like a 3 to 6 month period of different activity and different touch points.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? But what the only thing I would caveat that with is that is probably for the marketing team, right? But the bigger narrative, and this is where maybe it gets quite difficult for a lot of us, because what we don't necessarily want to do is put heat on specific channels with like the senior leadership team. So how would you navigate that, Lucy? That like balance between, I want to look at the nitty gritty, which tells me what to do, versus what I need to show the senior leadership team so that they don't go, well, I didn't see an incremental change in that for a while, so why are we doing it? Hard one. Curveball.
Ask me the question again. Like, let me just like ask me the question again. Let me think about it.
So when we as marketers are looking at, there's a set of metrics that we're looking at. So that's all like the marginal gain stuff, which I'm totally on board with. I think that's really helpful for us. But then when senior leaders see that kind of data, they get into the nitty gritty and they might start commenting or feeling like they can comment on like, don't do that thing because I didn't see any change or whatever. But realistically, we know sometimes it's a longer game. How do you balance that? Yeah,
well then I think, you know, you have to know the story generally of like within your organizations, roughly how many touch points does it take to convert a customer or to convert a prospect to a customer? Like, you know, for most of us, it probably is between 50 and 100 touch points.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to like arm the C-suite with that kind of information, to say that, you know, you can get a lot of insights from sending out a newsletter or sending out, you know, by running one event. You know, you can see intent there, but we shouldn't be expecting kind of a lot of bottom line action off the back of one activity. Be layered, you know, aligned to the number of touch points that we can see takes to convert a customer, or that we can at least guesstimate. Because a lot of us are still kind of guesstimating for how many touch points it should take. But you have to keep, I think it's a bit like, you know, we overestimate how much our customers think of us. We sometimes overestimate how much our C-suite and our leaders kind of remember what we say from a marketing perspective. So we need to keep kind of hammering home the message of it takes X amount of touch points or X amount of channels or, you know, X amount of time to kind of get to converting a customer.
And then I guess if you're talking about ads, for example, they might not lead to conversions, but you can say like, hey, it's really cheap for us to re-engage our audience, and that's building up our touch points with these ads, rather than it being like, you know, if they have to make revenue on their own back. Because again, that's depending on the business you're in, but usually not the case for our listeners because they're B2B. Before we move on to the next point, I really, really, really want to just rewind back to your point about experimentation, because I thought it was brilliant. And that's because I've seen a lot of teams, one, deprioritize experimentations when there is time and resource restrictions. But two, I've also seen teams that are afraid of it because their budget is so tight, and because, you know, they've figured out kind of how to squeeze the most out of it. So they don't want to touch anything else because they don't want to F anything up, right? So can you talk to us a little bit more about like how you look at that part of your job, and maybe how you keep it prioritized, and what kind of, I don't know, rhythm you have with experimentations, like some practical points people can take away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when budgets are super tight and you do want to do more experimentation, you have to go back to your owned channels as opposed to your external channels. So I would say that would be the first natural place to start. So for me, that's your email, your CRM, your website, your nurture flows. Those would kind of be your best places to start. And email is just like a really, you know, it's a really simple one. If you're looking at, say, customers, prospects, and you want to look at, it can be even things like maybe you decrease the length of your newsletter by 75%. You know, instead of sending like 3 articles because you feel like, oh, maybe 3 is the right thing to do, maybe you just double down on 1 article. Even things like, you know, I'll remove like all links from an email so that it's just kind of pure like read in the email. And even things like changing your subject lines dramatically, like that can have a real impact. And, you know, using AI to really help like challenge your thinking around subject lines, content can be really, really useful. So I think like email is a good win there. And even like CRM. So I don't necessarily think this is kind of a big like innovation thing, but I think turning over your CRM like every 12 weeks at a minimum is something that marketers can do. I mean, you're kind of straying into RevOps a little bit, but like, you know, you might be in an organization where maybe you don't have any RevOps.
You are RevOps.
Yeah.
You know, turning over your CRM every 12 weeks, looking for cracks is something that I don't think enough of us do, because it's really boring and it's really manual. And you kind of have to do it yourself, and you have to do it like quite often. But going like opportunity fishing and going intent fishing I see it as really like low hanging fruit, like seeing kind of where prospects have kind of come into the funnel and engaged with your organization, but maybe fallen out of it for whatever reason. But if you actually go hunting through your CRM, you can find a lot of answers there. and you are really like digging into the intent of why they were engaging with you in the first place, and looking at ways that you can re-engage. So things like that, like I think that you can even do like build in every like 12 weeks. I've worked in teams as well where they will like gamify like pilots and innovation. So ask your team to put it to your team to kind of come to you with ideas, and the best idea gets to report back to senior leadership, and all this kind of thing. I get little like prizes and that kind of thing. I think can really like encourage people and get them going, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a mental model that I use when I've gone into clients where we've had this, either we're just doing things for the sake of doing it because we think these are the things we should be doing, or we're not clear on what actually performs, so we've got to experiment because we don't know. So my mental model is, and this is probably because I came from the charity sector, but my mental model is start with the like, okay, do I know what works? That's the first question. And if the answer to that is kind of like a little workflow, the answer to that is no, I've now got to figure out what works. So what I do is I start off with all the things like you were talking about, Lucy, all the things that I can influence that don't cost any money, and I'm only prepared to spend money on things once I see some of those kind of incremental improvements that you were talking about. And trust me, like people get frustrated with this because they're like, it's taking too long, or like it's been a couple of weeks, I haven't seen any changes. But it's that kind of stuff that actually gives you the answer to that initial question, which is, do I know what works? Because that's the risk. And it's when you've got that small budget as well, it's like the risk is you could spend the small budget that you've got on a lot of stuff that doesn't work, and that's fine. But if I could actually siphon off some of that money and start with the like, what can I do free to figure out what works, and then start slowly introducing spend into that category. Like maybe it is I start spending on ads, or maybe it's to start with I try some free ones, not free ones, I try some very low cost ones, and then I see how that goes. It's those sorts of things that are the way that you kind of work it back to figuring out and answering that bigger question, which is do I know what works? Because ultimately you walk into a boardroom, that's what people want to know the answer to. Do you actually know what is working, and do you know where to put the money? And so I feel like if you can kind of work from that model, you can then play around with some of the stuff that Lucy's talking
and
about.
it's equally as important to know what's not working, right?
Absolutely. Oh my God.
And like actually go into the boardroom and being like, hey, we tried all of these things and they just tanked and they were really crap. Let's not do that again. I think that's just as valuable as knowing what works.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, speaking of the boardroom, do you want to say the next? Do you want?
No, you go.
Speaking of the boardroom, how do we build a case for some budget? Because often we have kind of barely enough to do anything, barely enough to prove any ROI. So, like, how do we get there? It feels like a chicken and egg problem. Chicken and egg? No. Yeah, chicken and egg.
Yeah, chicken and egg. Yes, absolutely. Like, I think it might have even been on this podcast that you guys were talking about that, as marketers, we might have a plan on a page, but with the C-suite, you basically need to fit it on a Post-it note. What you should, I don't know if it was maybe you guys that were talking about it, but I think you really need to dig into what the CFO and the CFO really care about. And I know as marketers, we love all the kind of little nitty gritty metrics, but probably for the most part that those aren't going to have a place, in the boardroom. Like I think like a key one that I always come back to is just revenue or pipeline to marketing spend ratio. And that makes it kind of super tangible for a C-suite person. And I think as well, you need to kind of nail the metrics that you want to communicate. So there are just so many words of like marketing supported revenue, marketing attributed, marketing generated, marketing influenced, and they all kind of mean similar things, but also very different things. So I think it's important, like you as a marketing leader and team, work out what you want to kind of be known for within the organization. And then that is the metric that you just continually keep, putting back to the C-suite. I think the second thing, like, we've talked about it already, but just the importance of leveraging the quick wins. And it's so important with like organizations like mine that we've got long sales cycles. So yeah, running pilots like we've talked about. And even, within within 12 weeks, you can organize and run a round table and that kind of thing. So you can still do the meatier things within a quarter and have stuff to show for it. And actually, Alice DeCourcy talks about this a lot in her book, Diary of a First-Time CMO, which is really good. So, for anybody interested in kind of getting good at like scaling pilots, like she's got some really good advice in that book.
Is this Cognizant?
Yeah.
Okay,
She was.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
The hot off the press, not anymore.
No.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Also, I think like it's just so, I think marketing and sales, you have to work super, super closely with your sales team so you can like attribute marketing input fairly.
Yeah.
Because you can have all the data and you can read all the data, but sometimes it's like speaking to your sales team that you can hear those anecdotal bits that, they might share. A decision maker saw our case study, or they saw that video on LinkedIn and they thought that was really interesting. They saw that PR interview. And you kind of really need to you need those little bits to piece everything together. So, don't just kind of look at your data all day. Like, you have to get out and speak to your sales team as well. And I think like the big one, at the moment, certainly is highlight your efficiencies through AI. So, you obviously want to be highlighting your pipeline wins to the C-suite, but highlight how much quicker and more efficiently you as a marketing person or marketing team are moving because of AI. So, like reducing your cost per content asset by 70% or whatever it is, like that. I think that really tells the right story to the C-suite that you are very focused on kind of productivity and that kind of thing. I think that's a massive. I think that's a massive win that is actually quite quick and simple for marketers to articulate.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually hadn't thought about the trying to articulate how more efficient you've almost made your content, your production processes or whatever that might be through AI. I think that's and I think that is going to become really important. I think one of the other things that I think about when it comes to asking for budget, now this is kind of I'm going to allude back to the previous story of some of the things that I've seen over the last few years with clients and getting budgets. Is quite often what happens is the budget is just set. And then what happens is you go back and you say, well, this doesn't align to our ROI, or this doesn't align to the metrics that I've got.
What's the goals?
Yeah, exactly. It's just basically pulled out of thin air because we've decided this is how much money we want to spend. Because this is the real hardest one for most marketers, I think. How do you tackle those kind of conversations? Because for me, that kind of tells me a lot. It tells me that I'm at a company that isn't necessarily that data focused. So where do you start with that kind of stuff? We can all have a go at this one.
Yeah, I think that's so key that you don't, when you're talking, when you're kind of going through those budget conversations, don't just agree to what the C-suite is telling you to spend on marketing. Because maybe probably the likelihood is they've actually never worked in marketing, so they really don't have the wider context. So don't let them kind of overestimate what marketing kind of should be achieving, or underestimate as well. I think it goes back to like telling the story using the data. So if the C-suite say, here is X amount of money for you to spend on marketing, and I think you need to say, okay, so for this amount of money and for this size of the team, here is what we will deliver, and here is what the company will get back in return. And like I said, do not overestimate that to make yourself kind of look
never
never overestimate it to make yourself look good, but just really spelling out to say, for that amount of money, here's what you will get back. If that's what you're comfortable with, okay, but if we spent this amount of money and used it in X and Y different ways, this is what we will get back, and this is what I would be recommending. Because you have to bring them on that journey, because they're probably thinking like, oh, that's loads for marketing, you guys will be absolutely fine with that, but they couldn't actually quote to you how much a campaign costs, or an event, or anything along those lines. So it's just so important to kind of really explain, and for them to be comfortable with the outputs of
right? If you're like, oh, you're going to give me 400K. Okay, we're going to make 500K in revenue, whatever the number is, right? They're going to be like, oh, well, like, shouldn't it be blah, blah, blah? You're like, nope, according to XYZ, it's this. If you don't like that number, that's cool. We can totally talk about it. But, you know, if you're going to throw numbers at me, like, I will tell you what they're going to look like in the end.
Yeah, and like, you know, I think that's where the third party data can be quite helpful, you know, because sometimes with third party data, I'm a bit like, you know, it's not something that I definitely want to use all the time. But for those kind of conversations, you know, the likes of like Gartner, Forrester, it can really help to just frame the ROI conversation like at the beginning.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Emma, any additional takes on this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've done this many times. I've done the whole like, I've talked about it quite a lot on this podcast, going in and being like, oh, what's that? You want to make £1 million and you expect that to come from marketing, but you've given us a £30,000 marketing budget, which is insane. I've actually seen that with my own eyes. Insane. And I was like, oh, right. So your ROI is like what, 100? It's like insane. So I think a dose of reality is good. I think it is important also to try and, if you are in marketing leaderships, align some of the metrics that you are talking about to and ensure that people understand their business metrics. So like, for example, people talk about marketing ROI and they go, that's marketing's problem, you know, but it's not actually, it's the business's issue because it's the amount of spend, you know, and that is kind of like, it's the revenue team or the growth team, whatever you want to kind of call yourself. That's a number for you guys to worry about, in the same way that conversion rates are a number for all of you to worry about, those sorts of things. So I think that kind of education is important. That's not straightforward. It's not overnight, but I think, yeah, use the data, show people a model, sit down with your CFO and say, can I work this back with you? What do these numbers look like for you? And very often when you do that, you see a little light bulb go, shit, because they realize it's like, it's numbers on a spreadsheet, but it's real.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely the way I would do it. But I would probably be quite tactical and like tackle each person and what they care about first, then go into the big meeting room and say to everybody, because then at least you've got everybody's kind of had a little bit of chance to digest what you're about to say, rather than just mic dropping and walking out, which is, I've also done that and that doesn't go as well.
No, but it's really fun.
It is really fun, but it doesn't. But very often they fire you and they still spend 30 grand on their marketing budget.
Yeah.
So.
And then like, oh, this is still not working.
I wonder why.
It must be the marketing team. I'd add two things to this conversation. So one is set expectations about how you want to do the budgeting. So let's say you've been promoted or you've been hired in, or you just want to change how you do the process. Like talk about it early, like 6 months out from when you even need to be doing this, to be like, hey, you know, I think it'd be more useful to do our budgets in this way. I want to do it collaboratively, or whatever the situation is, because ideally you are talking to your leadership about what the sales targets are, what percentage of that comes from marketing, and then working it backwards, not them just telling you a number. But the other thing I would say is just make sure you do your budget early. So like, you should know what your budget is and what your numbers are and what your ROI is way, way, way before you are asked about it. Because if you get in there early, you can then again hopefully have more of a collaborative conversation of being like, going to your CFO and being like, hey, I've done my numbers for next year, you know, it's looking like this, can we talk through it, etc. So just get in there early instead of waiting for that meeting to even be put in your diary, or that conversation to be brought up with you. Because I feel like you're then on the back foot anyway, because the other person is expecting to talk to you about it, not for you to talk to them about it. So I would say that as well.
Yeah. And also, I think the thing is as well, if you've not managed a budget before and you're like, oh God, I think this is where the CFO is your friend. Because you say, I haven't done this before, or I'm in the middle of working this out. Can we have a couple of sessions where we sit down and work out, you know, what the model's going to be? And then work with that person to figure it out. You know, I think a lot of people get very worried about going to those people and saying, I need help working this out. But like, in a really good working relationship between, you know, marketing, sales and finance, that's what that is. It's like, I would sit down with the CFO once a month, talk through our reconciliation, talk through our budget, talk through what I'm thinking, you know, all those sorts of things. And with a good CFO, that conversation should very much be welcomed.
Yeah.
And if it's not, I think, you might have to go up to the top dog to say, I need to be having these conversations with finance.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can ask for it. It's all cool.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, isn't it? It's like, yeah, just we have to be comfortable kind of over communicating in a way, and just building those relationships.
Absolutely. They're critical. Right. So Lucy, before we let you go, I think this has been a very practical session for everybody. Do reach out to Lucy and us if you ever have any budget related questions. We're here for you. So before we let you go, any marketing gossip for us? Anything you're either loving or hating at the moment?
One thing that I just can't make my mind up about is or are spoof videos. So I think I don't know if it's just that time of year, like we're just seeing more and more. Who's it that's really like Passion Fruit? You've probably seen some of theirs. They are really into these like spoofy videos, and I mean their Pride and Prejudice one is so bang on that I like it. I can just imagine like the persona of like the millennial woman who studied English lit at A level and now works in marketing. I was just like
triggered.
I just was like, that is just like me on a persona board, so like that one I just thought was amazing. But like, but even like, I just see even like mega companies, the likes of kind of like Blackstone, they're like the world's like biggest, they do their holiday video every year, and it's such a massive production, and they have like people like everyone across the organization. Like, so I see, those are examples that I think work really well. And I think like the memorability, the emotional recall is like magic. But then what scares me is like the margin for error is like, it's so close to being like, I'm not like, this is no guys, no. We've gone like too far for this. And I've even seen some companies hire actors to be in their spoof. And I'm like, I don't know about this. Like it just, maybe it's just within B2B as well, where we're still kind of, sometimes we're cool with it, sometimes we're not. But like, yeah, those like spoofing videos, I haven't completely made my mind up about them yet. And I think from a budget perspective as well, like,
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think because I make them sometimes as well. And I'm like, there's a fine line between insulting people, being funny, and it being relevant to your audience. And I think sometimes especially with the big corporates, sometimes I'm like, it's completely freaking irrelevant. Your ICP do not care about any of this at all. Like they're not interested. They're very busy. They're doing other things. So I'm with you. I'm like, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Like I also think it depends what it is. So like when people were doing spoof videos and jokes about the astronomer CEO and HRD, like we did one little thing the day it happened, and then we left it because we do it, we recognize, we move on, we make a little joke. But equally there were some people who really went in on it, and I was like, no you need to know where the line.
There's an interview with the lady in that video.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. Looking back at it, we all had a really good giggle about it and had loads of fun because this shit never happens, right, in B2B. But literally, that was fucking tragic. Like, looking back at it now, I'm like, oof, that was the worst day for many, many, many people ever.
Yeah. So those things, they do kind of like...
just
it might not age well either, right? It might be completely fine in the moment when you've done it, but like a year or two later you might look back at it and you're like, this did not age well.
Totally.
All comedy has its moments where it doesn't age well. So
it is. It's true. But do you know one thing I'm also really loving on LinkedIn, and I think like, I don't know if it's just because the algorithm is kind of forcing it, but I'm really liking how like marketing leaders are kind of saying, this is what has worked for me in the last like 3 to 6 months. And like some of them are actually getting like really granular, detailed, and you actually feel like, oh, this is really like, it's really useful insights that people are sharing, like just like the vulnerability. So yeah, I'm loving that. More of that, please, on LinkedIn.
Couldn't agree more.
More honesty, more transparency around what actually works.
And how they don't just make inflammatory statements.
And how they handle people. I love those. I love it when someone's like, Our
It happened.
CFO thought I was talking shit, and then this is the stuff that I did to actually like fix things with them and then tags them in the post. I'm like, this is terrific.
Yeah.
Well, Lucy, it's been wonderful chatting to you. Again, if anyone has questions, please connect with Lucy. Ask us. We love a little budget chat. It's a guilty pleasure. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Really enjoyed it.
See you everyone on the next episode.